And that's the thing that's the problem. But because we're
Yeah.
never taught that that's the problem, we don't know. So we keep going, yeah, should be, what does that even mean? And actually it's like, what do you think will be different in your life if that happens? And what we get down to, and these are the words that I use a lot of the time, but what I'm hearing is we just want to feel better than we do right now. That's the sad part, is like we're suffering so much that we're so in need and hope of something to make us feel better that isn't us, that when we get it.
Hi, Anita. Welcome to the show today. Now, the last time we spoke, we were, early 20s. We were working in a nightclub in Falaraki, the Greek island of Rhodes. And we probably only knew each other really on a sort of surface level, hence the working environment of just nightclubs and almost feeling like we're on holiday all the time. But what do I need to know about you then to understand what it is that you do today?
Thanks for that, Matt. Yeah, it's interesting. As you say, we haven't seen each other for that long. And yeah, thanks for obviously having me on the show.
Pleasure.
Yeah, it's interesting because you opened with that, and as you said that, it was just that reminder to me how that life that we lived back then. I remember at that age, I think 21 was my last year there, thinking I'm going to retire on a beach. Like I was like, okay, I need to go and get a job now and be a normal human being after working, the clubs and stuff and having done my degree. And yeah, I thought when I'm in my 60s or whatever, I want to get back to this kind of life, right? And probably about 10 years later, maybe a little bit, 13 years later, I ended up moving to Australia, and pretty much recreated in a bit more of a sensible way. I wasn't drinking really by that age. But yeah, recreated a life that I thought was only going to be possible once I'd retired. And so the whole human behavior part, the thing that I do as my job now, enabled that in theory, a lot of it. So whilst I was here in the UK, I was working a corporate job after we finished up in Greece, or I finished up in Greece. And I got to my 30s and I was like, it's time for a change. And so if I go right back before we worked in Greece, growing up as a child, for some reason, I was really nosy and I was really interested in humans and in human behavior. And I would ask a lot of questions. And, after trying to piece it together in my later life, it seemed that, I was kind of looking around from quite a young age and it seemed like people weren't that happy. And I think it's that thing where we can often look at kids and think, oh, kids should just be happy. And we were all happy when we were younger. But for me, and I'm sure there's many others, but for me, there was this kind of looking around the world and seeing these grown up people that didn't actually seem happy. I wasn't getting that from what I was seeing. So I think that I went around questioning people because I wanted to understand what it was to be human. And I think I wanted to make the best of myself and to be a happy human being. So that process,
that search for happiness or to be content with what you have. It's something we all sort of strive for. And I think sometimes this might sound like a funny statement. I'm searching for it, but I don't really know what it is because you haven't necessarily got it. You just want something different. But it's that searching and understanding yourself. I mean, I've learned lots about myself over the last few years. I always thought I was the completely clued up. I knew everything. What I couldn't understand why everyone else didn't think like me, and that now I've understood actually we are all much more different. I thought I was quite, I'm not going to use the word normal, but just I was like, why doesn't everyone think like me? Why are they doing it like that? But it's just how we're brought up, the experiences we've had, I guess, and understanding more about yourself.
Yeah. And I think the key to that is, being obviously like that myself, at some point is I think it comes down to the fact that we are not taught to communicate at a deep enough level. So that the reason we go about the world thinking that everyone should think like us is because no one's ever told us, that their inner world, basically. So this is all the stuff that I've learned over the last years is to to see that we aren't all the same, and to see that our experiences have been different, but to also see that we don't talk about it. And I think I remember getting to a certain age, and I'm not sure whether it was more teens or probably later 20s maybe. And I would, I'm going through my life quizzing people, right? And I got to a point where I was like, I'm not seeing anyone that hasn't got some shit once you ask them enough questions. It was kind of, that was like my mission, was to just go around and see, is anyone free of shit? And I, as I said, I was probably somewhere in my 20s where I was just like, had this realization that if you dig deep enough, everyone's got shit. And I remember going around and saying this to people, and they'd be like, no, that person's fine. And I look at them and their life's amazing and mine's a bit crap and all of that. And it's like, go and ask them these questions.
Yeah.
Sit and talk to them for long enough, and they might, people opened up to me, because obviously there was someone that seemed interested. So I would get people to open up quite easily. And I would dig around enough to find, oh, there's your point of upset, and there's your point of hurt, and all of that. And so for me, as I went through this process, it was like I'd finished uni, I'd worked in Greece, I'd done all that. And then I went and got a normal job. And I worked a 9 to 5. And around the age of 26, I started seeing a therapist myself, because I had some shit that I wanted to sort out, and I'd thought about it for years and never done it. And, as I went to see her, I wanted to have her job. Like, I wanted to be in her chair. I was like, she's so lucky she gets paid to do what I love doing, which is asking people questions. But as I said, I'd done the degree, I'd got this job, and I was like, how am I ever going to start again in this? I don't want to go back to uni. I was not interested in the academic part of school, of university. It wasn't my way of learning, which I know now, my style of learning. So I thought it was never going to be possible to be able to do a job like hers without having, a degree in psychology. And then when I got into my 30s, and then I went on this 3-month holiday to Australia, I got there and I was surrounded by people that were coaches. And some of them had gone and done courses and others hadn't, right? They were using their life experience to coach people. Obviously, there's mixed reviews on these things. But I definitely thought I was so experienced in asking questions. It was a bit like, well, yeah, I can do this anyway. But I wanted to go and study something. So I found a course, Neuro-Linguistic programming, for those that might have heard of it or not. It's NLP, and it's all around how we run our own mind. And it was initially it was an 8-day course that I did, and it just blew me away, because I'd been in therapy for 8 years at this point. I'd just, finished with my therapist because I was going to Australia. Even after going through that whole process for 8 years, this was actually kind of like a modality that showed you a step-by-step of how we run our own brain. There's like a model that actually, pinpoints it all. And it shows you all the programs that are available to us. There's 120 mind programs that we select through childhood, right? We'll go into a bit more.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, we kind of select them through childhood, and then they become the thing that runs us on autopilot for the rest of our lives, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, I've done therapy for all of these years, and I would have never have known, it's things like, whether you're a people pleaser, whether you're more on the disagreeable side. And for me, I was more on the disagreeable side. And although I knew it to a certain extent, I was like, oh, there's an actual program that is like the opposite of being a people pleaser. And that's the one that and yeah, it was just fascinating. It's like I thought I knew myself really well. And I was so glad that I did that course, because I went into coaching with this whole new set of toolkits that wasn't just inquiring about someone's life and giving them some advice based on my own experiences. Yeah. And the beauty of the coaching was that it was all about, here are the questions to ask the person in order so that they can explore their own internal world, rather than me thinking I know more about them than they know about them. And there are times where I genuinely will have known something that's about to fall out of someone's mouth. But other times I can think that that's what they're going to say. And then they give me something completely different. And I'm like, thank God I'm not just worried about, telling them everything about them. So it was really, really, invaluable to do that. And I did that course then. It was the coaching company I did it through. You take the course once and you can do it free for life. So I kept redoing this course over the space of a few years, and they had like loads of other courses that then followed. So I pretty much, spent 7 years. I still go on the courses now, so I'm still 7 years into the study of it. It doesn't stop. So there's always new things to learn. So I kind of went from going, oh yeah, I can do this coaching thing without any, needing any experience at all, to having studied more than I ever have, in my whole life, more than school, more than degree. And the beauty of it was that learning style for me was to go to a course and watch. So I would watch people learn coaching live. And I would feel the emotions around it. And I would, so my learning style, I realized, was visual and feeling, which in classrooms, it wasn't, whatever was going on in the class. It wasn't a human behavior subject, even at school, that I could have loved. But yeah, it just wasn't my learning style. And I was dyslexic, I got that label quite early on. But the thing was, I used to get extra time in exams. I didn't use it. I wasn't interested. So you could give me extra time. It wasn't that there was anything. That's how I see it. There wasn't that there was anything wrong with me in that sense that I needed the extra time. I just saw it as it's not something that I've invested myself to be good at. Therefore, I'm not great at it. So that's the way for me that I saw my label of dyslexia. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing. All those little programs that run us, and you said, about us, communicating and explaining and understanding that everyone feels different. And we talk about school, but lots of our childhood experience at school were people talking to us, telling us how everything is, and maybe there's not enough on the other side of you need to communicate how you're feeling and how you see something and the experiences you had. And I've got this thing where I think I heard it in a podcast, and I've always thought, I've got 2 young kids, and sort of one of my aims is really not to fuck up my kids. And what I heard was actually, actually your aim is to not fuck them up too much, because everyone, will have something from their childhood. And you commented on that before, that when you delve in, everyone's got a bit of trauma, everyone's got some baggage, and whether that was, I guess neglect or just completely just experiences. We're all holding on to something. It doesn't mean it was a negative done by their parents. It was just the way that you experienced something and took it, and it stayed with you as you've grown up, I guess. But so my aim is to reduce the amount of fucking up that I do to my kids. And I've done that through trying to learn about myself.
Yeah. And it's so common to, to hear people when they've got kids and they kind of hear this stuff and they go, but this is the thing that I always say to anyone, to my clients. It's like the fact that you're doing this work is a step towards your kids being less fucked up, in theory.
Yeah.
Because it's like, because people always go, well, what do I need to do for them? And I'm like, well, you're here, so you're doing it for them. Yeah. So you're learning about yourself. So you're going to show up, hopefully, as a better human being, and that's what they learn from. So it's that whole thing of, they learn from more what they see than what you tell them. So you're going to go, get off your phone, as I hear my friends say, and then they're sneakily, on their phones or whatever.
And we pick up these things quite early, don't we? I saw a post from you that, like, by 7, you've formed lots of opinions and ways. I guess you're almost like a roadmap of what life is.
Yeah, totally. So it's about 10 months old and 7 years old, we're fully forming. Pre kind of 10 months, we're the oceanic consciousness that most of us are trying to get to through meditation, right? So we come into the world in more of that kind of state, and then the conditioning starts around 10 months old when we start to be able to hold things in mind. And then up to about 7 years old, because you think if you're programming something for that many years, then it's going to be quite fully set by 7 years. So by the age of 7. So people can often, like, I even when I was younger, I remember just, hearing adult conversations and taking so much in from it. And then as I got older, I would hear people talking in front of young kids in a certain way, having conversations with their friends. And obviously they're thinking probably that their kids are too young or, not realizing. And I would sit there and just be like, they're sponges. They're hearing this and they're taking it on. I remember the things that, when I was younger, the things that I could work out that was happening with like adults and, situations where people might have been having affairs and things like that. And I was kind of piecing it together. And I was really small at that age. I was pre-7 probably.
Yeah.
Just working it all out. And we're much more intelligent than we can ever realize at that age. So it's like, it's prime years. So this is why, when we have got kids, to be able to know that they're, someone goes to me, oh, my kid's 10 now, is it too late? And it's like, well, no, because you've come into coaching or therapy and you're 40.
Yeah.
So if you can, they're very malleable at that age. The more that you can do for them at 10, you're saving them potentially 30 years. Some of my clients, some friends have their kids already seeing therapists. And I'm like, that's great. They might be a bit embarrassed about that. I'm like, no, it's absolutely fantastic that your kids are getting that opportunity to, as you said before, to start looking into their feelings, their thoughts at such a young age. It's getting better at schools, some schools from what I'm seeing. There's plenty of places, after spending so much time in Australia, where there's yoga and meditation, things like that coming in more and more. So it's a lot different to how it was. But there's still a way to go. I go and present in corporates and things like that, and I'll bring that model in that I talked about earlier of how you run your own mind. And, people sit there and they're, in their 50s or whatever going, how did we never get taught this at schools? Like, and it blows my mind that their mind's blown because I'm so used to this work now. But you kind of forget that I'm bringing this into people new. They've never been introduced to how we run our own mind,
Yeah.
Never mind maths and all the rest of it. It's like how we run our own mind. What a great subject that might be.
It is amazing. I mean, I didn't start having any therapy until I was over 40. It's been 2 or 3 years now, and just learning little things about me and how I structure my day and things that give me that anxiety or the ick, just those funny feelings, and it is understanding that and going, okay, that does do that. How can I change? How can I adapt? What do I need to do? Whereas before I just assumed it was that was just life. That's how you lived. But I think understanding more about yourself and your brain is, it becomes a bit of a superpower, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. Yeah. And it's, I remember growing up and it was like, that whole expression of they'll never change. That whole thing. Once we're this way, we will never be any different. And as soon as I started learning about this, and as you say, the changes that you've been able to make, it's like we can change. And it's not only just if we want to change, but also if we understand how we've become the way we've become, and we get to know the intricacies of how we do what we do, how we do anxiety, for example. Anxiety, I had, really strong anxiety for a lot of years. And now, that process then was like learning how I did anxiety. So I would wake up in the morning and it would all be for a millisecond, just peace and, that whole waking process. And then my mind would just start looking for the first thing to rev the system up. So I always thought anxiety was my body. And then through this work, it was learning that there was something, then my mind would just switch on to think about something I had to do that day, freak myself out, get my energy moving in my body to get me up in the morning. That was the positive intention of the anxiety for me in those moments. But I just thought this was something that just happened to me. It's the same with depression. I know that can be quite hard to hear for some people, but it's the same as, anything that's happening for us, it's possible we can change, but we can't change what we can't see. So the understanding of how we do this, is the key. And this ties in with something you were saying earlier about that, how do we find that happiness, that contentment and all the rest of it, whatever it is we're looking for. And every person that I've quizzed on this, every client I've had, it's like when they tell me they want this in their life or they want that or they want stuff that hasn't happened or isn't here, I will always quiz them down to what is it? What do you think will be different in your life if that happens? And what we get down to, and these are the words that I use a lot of the time, but what I'm hearing is we just want to feel better than we do right now. And the belief is that when this happens, when that happens, then I'll feel better. But I always say to them, this could be so much simpler for you. And I've literally had clients where I've sat there and they're just in this whole thing of I need to get this. And when I've got that and when I've done this and when I've bought that and I've done that. And I'm like, okay, just slow down and just take a couple of deep breaths right now. And literally sit there. And I'm like, how do you feel? And they're literally like, yeah, I feel great. I feel better. And I'm like, is that what you want to feel more of? If you had that state for longer, would that be beneficial to you? And it's literally like a light bulb. And it's like, It's like cut out the middleman of that house that you need to buy, or that man that you need to meet, or that woman you need to, whatever it is, and just go straight to source. Take a few deep breaths. Is that the state that you would like more of in your life? Is that the state that you think you're going to get when you get your mortgage? Or
yeah.
You get that partner that you have a bit of a honeymoon period with for a while, and then they annoy the shit out of you after.
Yeah.
No? No?
I mean, that's really powerful, because,
Yeah.
I've been contemplating that quite a lot recently. I've made some changes in my business and things like that. And I'm always searching for the next thing.
Yeah, that was it.
Because I think it will, once I've done that, I'm just going to sort work and going to do this. And actually, when I get my next car but whatever I've ever got, it just then resets, and I'm like, okay, what's the next thing?
Yeah.
And I guess it's trying to be, if I'm not happy with what I've got now, will I be happy with what I've got when I've got this next new shiny thing?
Yeah.
Probably not, because there's always something more you can have. You know, when I get a newer car, well, in a year's time, it's old. Do I want the newer one, or do I want the faster model? Actually, do I want a boat or a plane? Like when does it stop?
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the key to it. And this is what links it back. So this is why I go to the clients, like, take a breath right now. So what the taking a breath does, it stops this. This is the thing that we want to shut the fuck up. This is what we want, the contentment and the peace. We want that to be less. Now, I do a lot of work with people, when they talk about maybe not wanting to be here, let's say, and we often have these conversations of, it's not that you don't want to be here. It's that this is what doesn't want to be here. And so a lot of people, when they kill themselves, it's not actually their physical body that they want to die. It's the voice in their head. Yeah. And there's a few books out there. There's a couple of people, that I have, in my life or whatever, where this has stopped. I don't know whether it's 100%, but that's what they say.
No.
It's pretty quiet, that. And a couple of them, there's especially one book I can think of. This guy was going to kill himself. He had the date planned. He was going to, take himself out. He had had a really kind of hard life of bullying and not being accepted in the world. And a few days before the day of him taking himself out, he had this kind of what we call like a dark night of the soul, where he went through a quite an extreme process. I don't know exactly, what that was. You might need to read the book for that. But he woke up and his mind had stopped. There was no more self-talk for him. And he no longer needed to kill himself, because he had killed the ego. He had killed the self-talk, which is the thing that, if we get to it, that's what most people want when they want out. It's they want this to stop. Because when we're not doing this to ourselves, when we're in, when we're at the gym, let's say, when we're out drinking, let's say, this is why, we might have some, issues with us going out partying or whatever. We're not in here worrying about what we haven't done or what car we don't have. We just have moments of just, meditation. It doesn't matter how we're doing it. It may matter to the person how they're doing it, but it's, if we, whenever I get down to the detail of this with people, it's because we want to be present. We want this to just shush.
Yeah. I had this conversation yesterday with someone about, I'm sure lots of us use alcohol as a little bit of a self-medication, because and there is, that I haven't found much, that a couple of beers, suddenly I'm just in that better state. But the problem is, then you have a couple more and actually you feel even worse for the days following. But in that moment,
the absolute problem is, Matt, what I will say to that isn't the drinking, and people, will not like this either. But it's the voice in our head that kicks in and starts to judge ourselves about the fact that we've had those extra 2 drinks. Yeah. That's the problem. So whenever I work with people again, and whatever they're coming into coaching, whatever vice it is, we don't work on the vice. We work on the voice of judgment. And once the voice of judgment quietens, then we may not reach for the drink or the chocolate or the going out or the party, whatever it is. We don't need it anymore, because we don't need anything to quieten that down, because we've learned to do that ourselves through not judging ourselves. So judgment is the biggest mind program out of those 120, that I work with people on. So it's that, it's that voice that voice in our head. That's the problem. And what you're doing is what any of us are doing is we're trying to soothe ourselves with something. Mine was food, mine was chocolate. And it took years, years of therapy to kind of improve that relationship with food. But the biggest thing that helped me was as soon as I started coaching, was a coach saying to me, can you give yourself permission to eat as much chocolate as you want? And I looked at her like she was a lunatic. And I was like, no, I'll be obese. Obviously, I'm not going to do that. And, I actually went away and I thought about it. And I was like, okay. So what I try and do normally is I try and control things by saying, I'm not doing that again, or I'm not having that again. And what do? Like a little child, because we're still acting out the childhood patterns that was told we can't have this, then we want it more. Then I go out and do it. And so when she said that to me a few days afterwards, I was like, okay, let's just give this a go. So I did. And my relationship with food has never since that moment been better, from that kind of years of therapy around, what food meant and the rest of it. But to that comment, okay, let's try this. And I didn't become obese. And in fact, my weight has never been more stable than since, that time. Whereas before that, I yo-yoed a lot more because I had this kind of in-out love-hate relationship. And so that's such a useful tool that I use with my clients now, and I don't work with people that are, extreme alcoholics or extreme, food abusers. It's, coaching is not therapy.
Right.
We say it's for people that have, we say a more healthy ego state, because it can be quite confronting. There's things, it's not like therapy where it's more empathetic. It's like, here's your shit.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. And, for some clients it can be, more difficult, but it's, everyone, if they come into this coaching, if they're not confronted, then we're not shifting, we're not changing. So most people will hate me at stages, that's part of the work. But we know it's really themselves in the mirror that I hold up at them. It's not really me.
No, exactly. You're just asking those challenging questions, I guess, as well. And you're right, actually. That's the thing. Actually, the fact I had a couple of beers doesn't know me. It's the fact that actually I made a wrong food choice and then I missed the gym the following day, and I get that judgment. And I guess that goes back into almost what I was saying before, from the fact of, I'm 44 now, and I've got this thing at the moment where I feel I'd be further ahead than I am. But if you ask me what that was, I couldn't really tell you. I don't know what that is. And in fact, I've got a house, I've got a car, I've got kids. Like what? Yeah. And then you get into that, actually, right, I'm just being ungrateful. And then your mind switches into having a go at you for being ungrateful. It's tough.
Yeah. And then you can see within that, Matt, you're just describing the spiral that we go into of the overthinking in our heads. And that's the thing that's the problem. But because we're never taught that that's the problem, we don't know. So we keep going, what does that even mean? And actually it's like, maybe if I was just a bit more peaceful, that's further ahead.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Yeah. I think fixing it is going to buy something or change something. But actually, no, the fix would be sorting out that voice in the head to just be a little bit more pleasant.
Yeah. That's it. That's it. And I think, that just to kind of tie up in what you were saying and to end what I was saying as well, it's that whole piece around. So if I give myself permission to have those extra drinks, because I'm doing it anyway, right? I'm drinking it and now I'm going to resist it and judge myself, or just drink it, right? So permission to, and then even the next day when the self-talk maybe starts to go, what the fuck did I drink that? I feel shit now. At those moments, it's like, work on that part. So the drinks have been had. You can't change what's happened yesterday. Same with me when I used to, binge on loads of chocolate or whatever. The next day, the voice used to go, why did you do that? It's the end of the world now. You might as well just keep eating, blah, 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 blah. Whereas the change was then permission to have done what I did yesterday, because I did and I enjoyed it. I ate that chocolate, whatever. And then the next day, waking up and just being like, okay, then that voice might start of judgment. And then it's like, okay, there's the voice. There's the voice that has been judging self for years, probably since a child. This is the work that we do. When did you first learn to feel judged? And then you go back to parents, school, whatever it was. And there's a voice of judgment that's starting to get programmed. So then you're kind of in that moment of the next day going, well, there's the voice of judgment that's been programmed into me since I was 7 years old running.
Yeah.
So it's less about what happened yesterday in the chocolate and more about there's the voice. And it's kind of like we now want to separate ourselves, our current selves, from the child that learned judgment. And there's a process like, I don't need to be judging myself here. It's a program that's running. I ate some chocolate yesterday. It's okay. And then the less and less that voice is going, and it's practice. I'm not going to say this just changes necessarily overnight. I'd already done quite a lot of work, on the lead up to that. But the less that voice runs, then I'd just get on with it, to the point where I would eat, I'd still eat chocolate occasionally. And then the next day I'd wake up and I wouldn't even be thinking I ate chocolate yesterday. It would just be like, I get up about my day and I eat whatever I ate that day, having forgot. Whereas before it was a massive deal, and I wouldn't stop thinking about the fact that I'd eaten so much chocolate the day before. It's a game changer, and it's all just, it's all of that. But
changing it. Yeah. I mean, can you sort of almost talk to your inner voice? I've heard of people, because quite often, I'll be up in the night and my mind's on something, and I sort of say to myself, yeah, I get it, but not now. Like, we'll deal with this tomorrow. I need to get some sleep. And you can almost shut it off a little bit. It does come back, but it's our mind just, randomly has these crazy thoughts in the middle of the night when I can't do anything about it. It's just keeping me awake.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're never random.
No.
So we think they're random, but once you start really getting into this work, we literally pull apart the strategy of how those voices start. It's like even your dreams. Your dreams aren't just happening to you. Your dreams are what's not been processed throughout your day. So if people are having a lot of nightmares at night, there's a lot that's not been processed through their days, through their life, and it's screaming to come out somewhere. So nothing is random in these things. When we do this, we start to, pull apart the strategy of like, I've had clients that have had ringing in their ear, tinnitus, let's call it. I've had a couple of cases of this, and they go, it just happens. It just, and we literally sit there and we pinpoint what time it starts, what moment it starts. And they go away. And then I go, right, what you've got to do now is, as soon as you hear that ringing, go straight back to what you were thinking about just before it happened, or what you saw. And they've gone away and they've done this, and they've started to map. We start to map our process of how we do it. And, most of the time it's a stress response. So I wake up in the morning and I start judging myself straight away, telling myself I'm not worthy. And then it's like the ringing starts to shut the fucking voice up. It's like, like alarm bells. And it's like, now we're listening because we know what we're listening for. And I've had clients who that ringing stops because they're now seeing. So the moment that voice starts, or even when that alarm starts in the ear, it's going, okay, what was I thinking about just before? And then, as you say, having that conversation with self to change the worthiness issues or the judgment, again, patterns, programs from my past. Where did these start? Picking that up. And then the ringing starts to dissipate. It's the same with anxiety. It's the same with depression. It's the same with anything. It's going. So with myself, pinpointing how did anxiety, it wasn't just I woke up in the morning and my heart was pounding out of my chest. It was I woke up in the morning and I started to reach for things to think about, which then got my system, my heart pounding. So it was the mind doing it, and me thinking anxiety was a body, just something that existed in the body, because that was stronger than being able to pay attention to that. So this is the work. It's like breaking down the strategy for whatever we do. Excitement is going to, exhaust you as much as anxiety is if we keep living our lives on excitement. How are we revving ourselves up? It's through the mind. Excitement doesn't exist in the present moment. The present moment is actually quite boring. And this is what a bit, it's quite like, the system's calm. You're going to live a bit longer because we're not putting as much pressure on our hearts and our internal organs. It's kind of like, it's a roaring. And that's why we're constantly reaching for the mind to get itself excited, or anxiety or whatever. There's a positive in it. We're addicted somehow to revving up our system, and we'll go out and we'll blame social media and we'll blame Tinder and we'll blame all these other things. Those things aren't the problem. And this is something that you don't hear many people saying. Everything external to us is our problem. It's not. It's the meaning that we make in mind of what's in front of us that causes us now I'm going to judge myself for my social media intake or being on my phone. How's that useful to us? Hopefully we'll judge our way out of these things, because that's how we were brought up to judge. Judgment gets us to stop doing things. If it wasn't useful, we wouldn't be using it. whether it's drink, whether it's, the phone, whether it's social media. We're using it. There's some products that have been made that don't get used. There's a reason for that, because they're shit and they're not useful to us.
Yeah.
We're using stuff. Let's look at the positive intention in the use of it, rather than just judging ourselves for our use of it and our screen time. Let's see what it's doing. Maybe it's bringing us into moments of stopping this from fucking itself. And just for a moment, this screen is giving me a bit of, silence. Now I'm engaged with the shit that I'm watching, or the not shit, the really useful stuff that I'm watching. And this is the thing, we talk about human connection, but I'm sitting there and I'm listening to someone talking absolute crap for 2 hours, or being rude or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Or I could be sitting on my phone watching this podcast, for example.
Yeah.
So we're so conditioned as well in the way that we talk about things being good or bad. But if you actually zoom out of it and look at it, it's it's not just about the thing. It's about the experience and the meaning that we make of it in mind. So that's all part of the conditioning now, to berate ourselves for things, rather than going, what's the positive in it for me in that? And sure, you don't have to be doing it forever, but just see why you do it and have a bit of compassion for yourself that wants to pick your phone up because your mind's driving you nuts in those moments.
Yeah. I mean, that thing about excitement, it doesn't actually exist in the present. And you're right. I mean, I've done it in marketing of mapping that process, getting people exciting about the new product or the new purchase. And actually, I've had it. I spoke about getting a new car. Then the exciting part of the new car is waiting for it to arrive. And then that first week, you wash it every day for the first week. You do. After that, there's Costa Cups in the footwell, and actually it's just a car again. The excitement part was before you got it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the same, it's like the honeymoon period, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. And that's what ends a lot of relationships. It's the comparison to the first bit of excitement, or the waiting for the partner.
Yeah.
There's not many people I hear that have been in relationships a long time that is as excited about their relationship as they were in their dream of the relationship,
Yes.
And but that's why so many things end in divorce and breakups, because the expectation of this fairy tale for us poor humans that want some saving isn't the experience that anyone has.
No.
So it's that's the sad part, is we're suffering so much that we're so in need and hope of something to make us feel better that isn't us, that when we get it and our shit comes up a week or a month or a few months later, then it's their fault, because that wasn't how it was in my mind. When it's actually, not to judge ourselves, but it's our fault. It's our fault that we weren't taught things better when we were younger. If we just had this thing where relationships, they're difficult, they're hard work, you're going to feel shit. You're going to feel as shit as you do when you're single as you are in a relationship, and there's work to do. Then at least we might go into it a bit differently. But we don't. We go in going, all right, this new relationship, this next relationship, or a relationship is, or the car or the job or whatever. Honeymoon period ends. We're back in we're distracted for a few moments, for a few months maybe, in the newness of it, and then our shit just kicks back in because it normalizes. And that's the suffering of.
And it covers so much of your life, doesn't it? Like you said, there, relationships, purchases, substances, social media, anything. It's all just to that excitement, the buzz, the anxiety. They're all linked in it. Actually, we're all just trying to deal with our heads. Because I saw a stat somewhere. It was like, if you were given the choice between like an electric shock or a couple of minutes with your own thoughts, most people would choose the electric shock.
Absolutely.
Because we don't want to be left alone with our own thoughts, because it's our mind that drives us mad.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. And so that's why COVID times, that was my biggest kind of influx. I was only a couple of years into this work anyway. And COVID was just great. It was for me, for business.
Yeah.
But good for them in the end as well, because, the amount of clients that came in and what we worked on was them getting comfortable with the fact that they were at home on their own, or at home with the flatmate or the partner or whoever it was they were living with, So it was getting themselves comfortable with their own mind, to the point where it was okay. Because that was the thing. It was like, the problem wasn't that we were locked down. I mean, I was coaching a lot of people in Bondi, and we were out for a lot of the days walking up and down. It was a glorious, I mean, I really enjoyed lockdown. I was walking up and down with clients, and it was sunny, and it is, that was winter in Bondi. And, but that's what we worked on. Yeah, we worked on the fact that the problem wasn't lockdown and that we couldn't go out to restaurants and see friends or whatever. The problem was that we were not comfortable with the thoughts that were running. So it was like working through that then, became quite interesting for clients to be able to kind of start piecing together. Okay, what's that voice saying? Journaling, meditating, getting really still, getting silent with, there'd be practices where rather than just sitting on your couch, on your sofa and, being in your head, not realizing it, but, worst case scenario about COVID, obviously not being able to go out, all the rest of it. It's like, sit on the sofa and have no thoughts running, listen to the nature outside or the cars, whatever's going on. Listen to the stillness, look at what's in front of you, get into your senses, feel whatever's happening in the body if you're comfortable to do that. And the minute that's happening, there's no problem with being alone. In fact, what tends to happen with a lot of clients, this was my own experience as well, is we actually tend to become more introverted because that can get quite noisy. We don't need it as a distraction anymore, and it's quite comfortable to be alone. So it's not like you then lock yourself away in the house, but forever. But it's more of a choice then. I can go out because I want to go out, not because I need to go out to get myself out of my head.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's choice. It becomes more choice rather than need to get the fuck away from ourselves.
Wow. There's so much to take away today. We've had quite the conversation. I mean, just to finish off today, what would you say to anyone who's sort of listened to all of this and is thinking and recognizes maybe some of those, triggers or bits within their head? What is the first step? What do they need to do? Reach out to someone like yourself to start unpacking it, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Go and do a course. Find a coach, read some books. There's loads of stuff. See, I spend a lot of time on the internet, on social media and stuff. Just, there's so much out there, so much great stuff now. The stuff that I hear today, even compared to 7 years ago when I first started training now, when I go on and I Google things that I used to try and Google years ago in when I was getting trained, and you couldn't find any of this stuff back then, because the training I had was to a pretty high level. And it's, there's so much more of it now available. So find your learning style and recognize how you learn best and go and find whatever it is. And it's it's the same thing, like I always say to clients, sometimes the label of someone isn't as important as the resonance. So go and find someone who you really resonate with, and there's no point in going to a course. I've been, before I started training, I went to a couple of open days of a couple of courses, and I was like, no. And then I found the guys that I trained with, and I was like, yes, this is for me. And it's the same with when I went to see a therapist. I had one at first, I was like, there's no chance. And they were like, you're just resistant to therapy. And I was like, no, I'm resistant. And then I went for 8 years with the next one I found, right? So, there's so much out there now. And I think at first, when I first started doing this, I was like, no, my way is the best way, and you've got to do it this way and all of this. And over the years, you just see it, and you just see people kind of doing a bit of this, maybe then go and do something else. And it's working for them. So it's like, it doesn't matter what you do, as long as it's helping you and you're seeing that change, go and find whatever you need to find. And I always say, as long as you love it and believe in it, you will change. If someone says to you, like, people go, oh, that's a really good course, or that's really good, then someone goes and reads the book or does the course, and they go, well, I thought that's a bit shit. Well, it's not going to help you then, is it? Helped your mate because your mate loved it. It's not going to help you because you don't have the resonance with it. So go and find whatever it is, and then you'll know it's good. It doesn't matter whether someone's giving it a shit review or they don't like it. If it's worked for you and you've got some change, doesn't matter. It really, so many people say to me, what do you think of this book? What do you think of this podcast? And I'm like, what do you think of it? I love it. Good. There you go. Because I'll read it and I'll be like, I've studied this, to levels that are higher than this. So for me, it's not relevant, but it's good for you. So carry on with it. It doesn't matter what I think.
No, you've got to want to change, haven't you? you know, because otherwise you're right. It doesn't matter how well qualified that person is.
No.
You know, if you're resistant to it, it's not going to have any
No.
impact. You've actually got to connect with the person and be open and wanting for this to
Yeah.
work for you.
Yeah.
Because again, that's back in your mind, isn't it? You know, your
Yeah.
mind has got to want
Yeah.
to.
Exactly. And this is the question that we always ask. It's like, what's the positive intention in you holding on to the way you are now or the way it is now? And if it's strong enough for them, then they're not ready. Then it might be that something needs to happen, you know, further on in life for something to change. But it's not, you know, it's not everyone's time. They find it when they need it. And that's,
That's a
that's
really
it.
interesting point. Yeah. Are you ready to change? I think, that's a really interesting point as well.
To let go of the version of you that the only way you've ever known yourself. It's a big one.
Yeah. And actually just on that, do you find that people find that almost quite traumatic in itself? I've certainly found it that the change in understanding myself and knowing that actually I'm a different person now, probably than I was to 5 years ago.
Yeah.
It has felt a little bit, while brilliant, at times a bit icky, I suppose, because you're unpacking a lot.
For sure. Yeah. Some people sit there and go, I wish I'd never started this. And I was like, it can seem like that, but it's like, when you really talk them through it, the thing is, once you've started this, you're not really going to stop it. You know, the fact that people go, I'm just going to go back to, and it's like, but you already know what you've learned now. So there's not really a going back. And people kind of go, ignorance is bliss. And I'll look at the people that they're saying are ignorant. And I'm like, they ain't in bliss. No. You go and find a monk on a mountain, that might be bliss, but ignorance isn't bliss. It's just, they may seem like it is, but if you're in their head, it ain't going to be bliss. I've quizzed too many people to know that.
That
as
is
long as we have this
line.
Thinking away,
it's not bliss.
Yeah.
Anita, thank you so much for your time today and your insights. You know, I've learned loads as well, and it's, you know, certainly, you know, give me some bits to process. So thank you once again for your time today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. It's been awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Balanced Ambition podcast. I genuinely hope the stories inspire you as much as they inspire me. If you found value in today's conversation, please share it with a friend. And remember, by subscribing, you won't miss an episode, and it would truly mean the world to me. Stay balanced, and I'll see you next time.